Hello, this is Mike Cook, and I'm here in my home gym, ready to bring you another edition of Anti-Doping Updates. Today, we've got two great stories to talk about. One is an Australian rules football player, and secondly, it's talking about the consequences of the WADA versus RUSADA decision. Okay, let's get started. So the first story to talk about today is William Rioli. He is an Australian rules football player, and he plays for the West Coast Eagles in the Australian Football League. And the Australian Football League is a signatory to WADA, so the World Anti-Doping Code applies to this case. He submitted two tests, one an in-competition test and one is an out-of-competition test. The in-competition test was in August of 2019, so this is going back quite a ways. In that August test, it was determined that he substituted somebody's urine for his own, had some urine substitution going on. I was never able to see the full reasoned decision in this case. That's been held private, but at any rate, the Australian Football League found that he had urine substitution. Second test, so the first test was out of competition. Second test is in competition in September 5 of 2019. That also was determined to be urine substitution, and it also tested positive for cannabis. So we're going back to the previous rules under the World Anti-Doping Code, and urine substitution is an intentional violation and usually subject to a 4-year sanction. So when this case came down, William Rioli was suspended by the Australian Football League, and so that led to a lot of speculation in the Australian media about why he was suspended. He's a top-notch player in the league and with his team, the West Coast Eagles. And the case went on for quite a long time, and it's only till now that we get the outcome of it. So because it took so long, and because William Rioli admitted very early on in the course of the investigation that he had engaged in urine substitution, the disciplinary committee of the Australian Football League decided to reduce the amount of suspension from 4 years down to 2 years, and to backdate the starting time of that 2-year suspension back to August of 2019. So that means William Rioli will be eligible to play. He has a 2-year sanction starting August 2019, meaning he will be eligible to play again in August 2021. Okay, the next story to talk about is consequences of the WADA versus RUSADA decision. One of the consequences of the decision is that the Russian flag and anthem can't play at any victory ceremonies in any World Championships or Olympics during the 2-year sanction period. Another consequence is that the Russian Olympic Committee can't bid, host, or be awarded any World Championships during the sanction period. And Russia had already been awarded World Championships in several sports during the sanction period, and those include sambo, kickboxing, wrestling, sport climbing, volleyball, and the Beach Soccer World Cup. So I'm going to talk about each of those in turn, because the part of the RUSADA decision was that they can't bid, host, or be awarded any World Championships during the 2-year sanction period unless it is legally or practically impossible to change the venue. So for sambo, it was scheduled to take place in Moscow, but the International Sambo Federation decided to change it to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. So that World Championships is moving. That's the one for 2021. Next up, we have kickboxing, and the 2021 World Championships were going to be held also in Moscow, but those are going to be moved, but it hasn't been publicized yet where those World Championships are going to be. Next is wrestling, and United World Wrestling is the international federation regarding wrestling. And they announced that their 2022 World Championships would move from Krasnoyarsk, Russia to Belgrade, Serbia. And that's because Serbia was going to host the 2020 World Championships, but that was canceled due to coronavirus. And then they also announced that Russia would get to host the 2023 World Championships. But that decision to award Russia the 2023 championships, at least to me, appears to violate one of the sanctions in the Russia versus RUSADA decision, and that is namely the awarding of world championships. The sanction are they can't host, bid, or be awarded any world championships during the 2-year sanction period. So I think it's unfair for United World Wrestling to award them the 2023 World Championships. So that's wrestling. So next up, we have the International Shooting Sports Federation. Their shooting World Championships for 2022 was supposed to be held in Ignatovo, Russia, in a facility owned by the ISSF president, Vladimir Lisin. The ISSF said that they're going to keep it there because it is legally and practically impossible for them to move it, although that also seems a little dubious to me, especially considering that the individual who owns the facility where the competition is going to take place is Russian and is the president of the ISSF. So take that as you will. Next up, we have sport climbing, and the International Federation of Sport Climbing was going to host their 2021 World Championships in Russia, and they also said it's still going to take place in Russia because it's legally and practically impossible for them to change the venue. Next up, we have volleyball and beach soccer, and both volleyball, the International Volleyball Federation, and FIFA, the International Federation for Soccer, neither of them have announced what their plan is for the World Championships of Volleyball and the FIFA Beach World Cup. Those, in my opinion, are a better candidate for keeping in Russia because those sorts of tournaments, team tournaments with multiple teams, and necessarily has multiple venues for hosting the competition, not just one arena or a sports place. So that I could see a better argument for keeping that in Russia, and that would keep in line with the Russia versus RUSADA decision. Lastly, so there's the 2022 championships. The International Ski Federation was going to have the snowboard, freestyle, and free ski world championships. Russia had bid for the right to host the 2025 championships of that. And the FIS announced that their bid is void now, that they can't bid for the 2025 championships because the bidding period is during the sanction period. So that correctly follows the decision. Next consequence is that government officials can't hold positions in international sports federations that are WADA signatories, and can't hold positions in major event organizers. So that turns us to FISU, F-I-S-U, which is the International Federation of University Sports. And their president, Oleg Matitsyn, he was appointed by Russian President Vladimir Putin to be the deputy of sports ministry in Russia. So he's a government official. So he stepped down from his role as president of the International University Sports Federation, FISU. Lastly, the consequence of Russia versus RUSADA is that the Russian national anthem can't be played at any victory ceremonies during the sanction period. So the Russian Olympic Committee had proposed to have the folk song Katyusha as the anthem that would be played, but the IOC rejected that because it is associated with Russia. So the second proposal, which they just made, was to have Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 as a section of that, not the whole thing, a section of that as the song that would be played during any victory ceremony should Russia win. And they argued that although Tchaikovsky is Russian, this is part of world heritage. His compositions go beyond just being for Russia and is more of like world heritage. And so that's what they're proposing as their as the song to be played during victory ceremonies. So we'll see what tune we hear if Russia wins in the Olympics or any world championships during the sanction period. So that's it for this episode of Anti-Doping Updates. I'll be back next week with another exciting episode.